Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. And I have my good friend, Mr. Graham Luby. He is the Vice President Digital at Wasserman Digital, Team Was. Welcome back to the podcast, Graham.
Hey, Jason. Good to be here.
It's so cool to have you along for the ride again today. And this was meant to be part two in our two-part, it was probably going to end up being a three-part series, and it may still end up being a three-part series on customer centricity, how to operationalize customer centricity for manufacturers and distributors. And in episode 1 of the series, we covered voice of the B2B buyer, how can you know if you don't ask, doing customer interviews, really innately bringing empathy to the table and operationalizing empathy by actually talking to your customers about the things you're doing great and the things that you maybe aren't doing so great that need improvement. We talked about digital maturity, what it isn't. We talked about buyer-centric transformation. Okay, cool. We now know what our customers want, but the importance of building processes around expectations and the tech stack around those processes, we talked about that. And we talked about creating a feedback loop with our customers that isn't a one and done process, that actually bringing them into our journey, creating as many opportunities as we can, whether that's NPS scoring, whether that's Feedbackify on our website, whether that's regular quarterly customer interviews, whether that's, there's 100 different ways we can operationalize getting feedback from our customers, but we actually have to think about it. We actually have to want that feedback, and many businesses simply do not, because they don't actually want to hear what they're doing wrong. They don't want to hear what they need to improve. They don't. It causes a hit to our ego, is what we discovered here, which is it's really sometimes hard to hear the negatives when sometimes that is the most important thing we could possibly hear to be able to stay relevant as of 2025 and beyond. And what we were going to pick up where we left off in this next episode. We're going to talk from strategy to execution, making digital changes stick. We're going to talk a little bit about your new process internally around operationalizing customer centricity. We're going to talk about Salesforce and process automation. And we're going to talk about a bunch of different things around customer centricity. But off air, I think we're going to probably take a slightly different course for this next episode in our series because of just how fast AI is now starting to really impact our industry. And I think what we want to do, and we were talking about off air about how you're playing with AI on the daily now. I'm playing with AI on the daily now, or already was with a lot of my content and a lot of AI pieces of software, AI-led, AI-first pieces of software that I have part of my content workflow. And even with my work delivery, there's certain pieces of software that help me. They don't do the work for me, but they augment me, and they especially help with research. That's what I found AI to be very good at. But taking it a step further, I've been playing with Lovable. I've been creating apps recently that has given me so much joy because I've always known what I wanted to build or had lots of ideas of what I wanted to build. But historically, in order to build even a basic working prototype, it would take 1 to 2 months. It would take probably 5 to 10 grand, even using offshore developers, freelance developers. And so I didn't build. I just simply did not build anything that I wanted to see in the world from a software perspective. I never put it out there because it was just too much of a heavy lift, too expensive, too stressful, and too time consuming. And now I have already gotten a piece of software to a 90% level of completeness for V1 that I want to use internally in my own business. And it took me all of less than a week and less than $500 worth of vibe coding tools, that Lovable being central to that, but then connecting to other third-party services as part of the app build process. This is becoming a very rapid game changer. I have another friend who, in fact, I have two friends. I have another friend who has also used Lovable within the last 2 months to create a B2B focused analytics app for one of his customers, who these types of apps already exist in the B2C world. They don't exist in the B2B world. They wanted to see this exist in the world for B2Bs, for manufacturers and distributors. So they said, bugger it, we'll just build it, and we'll build it on Lovable. They're now to their V1 state. I got a demo of this app recently. I was absolutely blown away by what they got built in under 30 days. I was absolutely shocked with the state that this app is at already and what it can do already. So we're going from idea to rapid prototyping at least so fast now with these vibe coding apps. Sure, they've got their issues. I'm not going to pretend that this is a panacea by any stretch of the imagination. But what we were also talking about is not only are these apps allowing us to do rapid prototyping faster and easier and cheaper, but it's actually probably oddly going to create a scenario where we need more developers, more elite developers in the world, not less. Because if we're producing a significantly larger amount of software to begin with, then once we reach escape velocity or we find product market fit or whatever, we're going to want to bring that internal. We're going to want to have serious hardcore engineers working on this stuff so that we can own this stuff inside of our businesses. But I just genuinely believe there's going to be a lot more software in the world. What's your thoughts?
I definitely think that there are going to be a lot more applications developed than there are today. And I think they're coming at it from a few different angles. There's been this theme that you can vibe code a enterprise application system, ERP or CRM. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen because there's tremendous complexity. And for a CIO, there's not much upside to vibe coding something that the business is business critical and the business has to run on. But I do think that there is a lot of opportunity for all those hidden apps, the micro apps, the shadow apps that are in organizations that fill a very specific niche or a very specific functional area that somebody that's good with Visual Basic whipped up over a weekend because they were excited for it and it solved a need. Or somebody did some complex macros in an Excel spreadsheet. Or somebody did something in Microsoft Access. It's still a product that Microsoft offers. I didn't know that until recently, but you can actually store all your data in Azure and it's been updated. But that app has been around for 25 years. I built a prototype of a SaaS application, like seriously, 25 years ago on Microsoft Access. That helped get funding, which was pretty cool. But what took me quite a lot of time to code on top of Access as a developer tool plus database, you could probably whip up in a weekend using a tool like Gadget or Lovable or one of the others. So I think that there's going to be a lot more development happening of those sorts of apps done by people that don't consider themselves developers. But then I think there's also going to be a transition where those apps need to get plugged into a corporate infrastructure. They need to get backed up. They need to get maintained. When the person that built it goes on vacation, there needs to be a plan that a process doesn't go down. So I think there's going to be this really interesting innovation going on around app development, and then it gets handed off to be solidified and hardened and scaled, and make sure that there aren't security leakages and data leakages and all that sort of things that keep CIOs up at night.
You make a very good point, which is that these types of apps, I'm as excited today as I've ever been to be in our industry. AI has, not that I ever lacked vigor, but it certainly, I think it has recalibrated what my view of what our industry can do and achieve. It has completely reset those expectations for me in a really positive way, because I know now that you don't necessarily have to be a developer to see really great software, at least get to the prototype stage in the world. If you're a really good BA, if you're a really good solution architect, if you're a really good enterprise architect, if you have a really good idea of what needs to exist inside your organization, you can probably build it, and you can at least get it to a basic stage of completeness to be able to get it to a prototype internal test proof of concept stage. And then the great thing about most of these platforms, at least in the case of Lovable, once you've got it to that stage of completeness, you now can export the code. They don't hold your code
Yeah.
hostage. You can literally zip up the code, export the code, load it up on Bitbucket or GitHub or wherever you want to host the code. You can set up your own internal infrastructure against that, your own AWS databases. You can set up your own Azure databases. You can set up wherever you want to host the actual infrastructure behind the app. You can go and set that up yourself. And so I love the fact that because the biggest challenge historically has been getting from 0 to 1. That is without a doubt historically been the biggest challenge to software development. It's not getting from 1 to 50 or 1 to 100, it's getting from 0 to 1. And so I think, and as we covered off air, this is going to have a dramatic impact on the app ecosystems that we see out there, because a lot of people are settling for substandard, not necessarily even substandard, just not perfectly fit for purpose apps, for whether it's the Adobe app ecosystem, whether that's Shopify, whether it's the Apple app ecosystem, Android, doesn't really matter. Just think of any app ecosystem you can think of off the top of your head. And a lot of consumers of these core platforms, they are putting up with substandard apps that don't meet their business requirements perfectly, because they're relatively cheap, they're easy to plug in, easy to set up, easy to configure, and it's right there for the taking. But I think you pointed this out. People are going to have to settle a lot less often in this new future, whether it be because their agency is going to be able to vibe code these simple apps very easily without having to have high powered, high cost developers to do, or they're going to be able to do it themselves, and they're going to be able to enhance and extend the core functionality of their enterprise applications already today. If I have a problem with my NetSuite implementation, or I want to do something unique with some Suite script, I can just tell ChatGPT exactly what I want to achieve with it, and it will generate
Yeah.
draft Suite script for me to load into NetSuite to run to achieve, or it will tell me how to create a saved search, which then I can attach a piece of Suite script to achieve an outcome, right? So there's things I can do programmatically inside NetSuite today that historically, even 6 months ago, would have absolutely required an expert NetSuite developer to achieve. And this is a pretty big change. And I don't think either of us can fully appreciate just yet how this is going to impact the work we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we can create some hypotheses of what's going to happen. And if I take a look at the app development, and with a lot of our customers, or with all of our customers, we start out with detailed requirements gathering. And those requirements then get used to build out the architecture and figure out what's core in the platform we're implementing, what third party apps can we spec into the system, and then where there aren't third party apps, what needs to be built, right? The third party apps today, when you choose them, it's does it meet the requirement 100%, 80%? Can it be visually styled to match the rest of the store and so forth? Going forward with the ability to easily spin up private apps like a lovable gadget, I think the decision process is going to be a bit more difficult. It's going to be more, there's going to be more build versus buy. Do I want to buy this app and pay 149 a month for the next 6 years?
Forever.
Or do I build it now, capitalize it, and my cost goes down quite a lot as an expense item? Or it's almost what I want, but I don't, but it's not quite there. So, well, let me just build it in an app. And the ability to do that is significantly less. Like the cost of building it, as you just said, is significantly less than it was a year ago. So it's really interesting how it's going to impact the dynamics. And I think customers are going to get more functionality that meets their needs perfectly than they might have just even a few years ago. It's really interesting dynamic happening.
It is. And I think that what occurs to me is it feels like the English language or the Spanish language, doesn't really matter what language you naturally speak. Whatever your language that is natural to you, your mother tongue language, it's the language of coding now. So we've gone from this. Some people can pick up second, third, fourth languages really easily because that's the way they're wired. Some people really struggle with it. They struggle with the syntax. They struggle with the verb conjugation. They struggle with the pronunciation of those words. Even myself, I'm picking up Spanish. I pick it up pretty quick. I took it in high school, so I'm picking it up pretty quick now that I live here. My pronunciation, I think, is pretty good. I've been told it's pretty good. But when I'm trying to learn other languages, and when my wife is trying to teach me some words in Canto, not so good, much harder, right? And so when my wife's trying to teach me some new words or whatever, my English speaking tongue just doesn't make those sounds. And it's similar to with programming languages, right? Some people are really naturally adept at picking up new programming languages. They pick them up pretty quickly. They understand the syntax, they understand the structure, they understand how to build the underlying code and the applications that sit behind the applications. And Some specialize in front end, some specialize in back end, some specialize in full stack, some specialize in system integration. But what if the new language of coding is whatever your mother tongue is, to where you don't actually have to learn those underlying languages? Now, of course, again, I go back to the fact that we're not seeing a world where there's no developers. We're seeing a world where there's probably a bifurcation, where there's a lot fewer average developers. There's a lot more kind of elite level developers because they've been pushed up the stack and now they really can stand out because really what they're doing is they're analyzing code that a vibe coding tool has created in the first place, or at least a V1 of the code, but they're going to look through it and they're going to go, that's crap. We're going to fix that. We're going to fix that. We're going to fix that. But what it does is it turns anybody that can speak their mother tongue well and articulate and describe well what they're trying to achieve, it allows that to become software. And that to me is the single biggest change because that way we don't have to learn another language. Just when I think about this, I liken it to I'm looking at potentially getting either the new S25 Ultra or the new Pixel 10 Pro from Google, which has real-time language translation through the earbuds. So it hears a language coming in, it translates it into your defined mother tongue in near real time and feeds it into your ear. And then when you speak, right, it can translate that in real time into the destination language that you want to be speaking. And it will translate it on your phone and you can show it to somebody. Now, I liken vibe coding to that, right? It's almost real time translating the English that I'm speaking and describing and what I'm trying to achieve, and it's translating that into the equivalent of code to make that thing real. And that to me, this is happening across human language and it's happening across machine language, right? We still have to have the coders that create the underlying languages to begin with that these vibe coding tools are using and the underlying database architectures and everything else. So we're still going to need elite level developers to create the plumbing and the underlying tooling. But what I'm discovering in my research is that even those elite developers are using AI to help build out syntax, to help build out structures, to help make them basically more efficient in building brand new things from scratch. And that's very
100%.
exciting.
100%. And when I look at how our technical team has adopted AI, and the vast majority of our engineers are experienced, like 5, 10, 15 years of experience. They're able to use AI tools like Cursor or Windsurf or whatever their IDEs to be significantly more efficient in the work that they're doing, as well as what we're seeing is, and this is really cool, is in code reviews. So anytime code's developed, a peer or a senior architect has to do a code review to ensure that's following standards and so forth. Those code reviews are actually shorter and they're less intensive because the AI is doing the code review before it even gets to the next level. So the next level is typically going to be more business centric to understand the logic behind what's going on versus saying you're missing a semicolon. And I think that the expectation starts becoming that the technologists are business savvy as well, not just heads down coding in a dark room on a Thursday night. It's they have to understand the business needs and make sure that those business needs can get turned into strong technology. I think there's going to be a premium on that.
And that's where I think the use for really high quality BAs, really high quality solution architects, enterprise architects, people that can bridge that gap
Yeah.
between business needs and technical solutions and be the essential translators between the two. I think that puts a premium, perhaps even more of a premium on that side of the business than it does on the pure coding engine room side of the business. And so for me, I think and this is, and I'd love your take on this. It's somewhat always been true that the most elite of developers, they have high empathy, they have great communication skills, they have better than average for a developer people skills, and those people tend to advance in their career farther, faster than the pure coder who really they have to have a solution architect or a BA come to them, sit down with them, speak their language and articulate it in a way that makes sense to them, as opposed to just simply speaking in business terms
Mm.
and then letting them translate that into a technical solution. It's been my experience that those developers who already have those natural people skills, those natural empathy skills, those natural interpretation skills, and that they naturally have the desire to even be in front of humans, because a lot of developers, they don't, and they'll tell you that straight up. They'll say, actually, I don't ever want to be put in front of the customer. Do not ever call me into a meeting. Do not ever put me in front, apart from our internal team, don't ever put me in front of people. I am very happy just sitting in front of a screen all day coding. And I think the opportunities for those types of coders will decrease, but I think the opportunities for the more well-rounded developers, it feels like the opportunities for them will increase dramatically.
I'd say it's probably split on the sort of industry. So our technology team, especially the solution architects, are all customer centric. They have to be able to bridge technology and business and be able to be in front of customers and speak to the customers. But we also have some engineers that, like you said, don't want to be in front of customers, but are very happy tackling very complex technological challenges. You've got a website that's getting millions of orders a month. Doing the scalability and figuring out how to make sure that it doesn't go down doesn't require conversation with the clients. It
Yeah.
requires somebody that's able to go into the back room and go heads down and not talk to anybody for a week or two. And I think for those engineers are going to be just as valuable going forward as the ones that are comfortable understanding the technological requirements and talking the business talk with customers. So I think there's probably going to be a need for both types.
Or what will happen, to your point, is those developers that would maybe historically have worked inside of an agency environment, maybe they'll go work for a SaaS app vendor instead, and they'll be working behind the scenes across scalability, across security, across all the tenants and across the entire infrastructure. And they will be able to set up really hardcore infrastructure that they don't, it would never be an expectation. They might speak to a product manager, but there would never be and that product manager might speak to customers, but
Sure.
there would never be an expectation that a developer in that environment would ever speak directly to a customer anyway, because they're building an app that is designed for a one-to-many
Yeah.
type of deployment. And I think you're right. I think there's always going to be room for those elite developers, but I think especially in agency environments, the value of developers that can speak to customers and can be put in front of customers, that can almost completely, I wouldn't say eliminate BAs and solution architects, but can pick up some of those responsibilities. I think that gives them a massive leg up.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. It's as a consultant, being able to speak to the end customer and pull out business needs and figure out how those business needs intersect with technical capabilities or lack of technical capabilities is really important. And um, overall, I think we're going to see more of those sorts of conversations happening with the client. That where the client's already built a prototype of something.
Yes.
Yeah, I built this, integrate it, or evolve it. So really being able to understand the business behind it and then talking through the data flows of how that actually gets integrated into the corporate environment. And we're starting to see more and more customers are coming up with expected solutions or expected solves because a lot of them are much more comfortable at that intersection of business and technology. That's going to
I
happen.
hadn't really thought of that. I hadn't really thought of that. You make such a great point, and that's why I love having these conversations, because everybody has their own sort of view or lens that they look at this through. But
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought of that fact that if let's say I was, I don't know, let's say I was a manufacturer or distributor, and let's say I was coming to you for the very first time. We never had offered e-commerce to our customers before, but we had, maybe let's say, using a Lovable or a Bubble or something like that. Let's say I had built a, we've still got our CRM. Let's say I don't know, maybe we're using Salesforce as our CRM. Maybe we're using NetSuite as our ERP or D365 or whatever. And so we've got this hardcore underlying business stack that we're using inside of our business. And we're pretty happy with the back office operations of how the business operates. But let's say hypothetically, I needed to build a custom app that managed the interaction between some of our third party agents that sell our products and our internal sales team. And we didn't want to give those third party agents full access to our ERP, but we wanted something to manage, okay, their pipeline, to manage their commissions, to manage all that interaction between our sales team and those third party sales agents. In this world, I would be able to build that, right, in something like a Lovable, but I would probably only be able to get it to maybe 80% or 70, 80% of completeness. But then I would want that perhaps to integrate in with my core commerce platform so that I can expose that functionality in the back end of my core commerce platform, right? So if I can get it to even 70% of completeness, and at least there's a UI for you to look at, and at least I can step you through the processes that we do in that app, and we can say, this is why we built it, to do these 5 things in our business that we couldn't find any other tool out there to do that didn't cost 100 grand a year, and we only needed to do this one tiny little thing. So we just went and built it in Lovable, and we hosted on Lovable, and it cost us $50 a month. At least if they've built the basics of the app, it doesn't even have to look pretty. If they can walk you through why they built it and the problem it solves for them, then you can at least, you're not starting from zero now. You're starting from 1 or 2 or 3 out of 10, but you can refine it, you can rebuild it, you can re-architect it, you can refactor it, you could build it into the new solution that you're building for them. It helps even those of us that are what I consider to be elite BAs or elite solution architects. If I can see something, it makes it a lot easier for me to understand. It's that whole show don't tell thing, right? Like, it's all fine and good if a customer tells me the problem they're trying to solve for, but if they've made a start in building something to solve for that and they can show it to me, wow, that like short circuits probably 3 discovery sessions as a result.
Yeah,
So that's very cool, isn't it?
without a doubt. And I think beyond just the apps, there are a lot more tools that are available today, like N8N. I don't know if you've played around with. Super cool.
Yes.
I geeked out a bit this weekend doing some workflows in it. But you've got N8N, you've got products like Celigo that are embedding a lot more AI into making integration
Patchworks and yeah,
systems.
all of them.
It's building on what Zapier hard coded, and now you've got much more flexibility. Where if there's a published API or an MCP, you're able to actually connect to it using some of these newer tools, and that allows customers to at least figure out or think through what's that flow going to look like of data back and forth, and what systems have to be connected. So I think it's going to have a very positive impact on projects going forward.
Here's another impact that's positive, I think, as opposed to replacing those of us that work in the industry. Here's a net positive that I discovered as I was building this app in Lovable, my first ever app in Lovable. I realized, geez, if you did not have empathy for how hard it is to build good software before, try building a piece of software and you will. I tell you, because oftentimes customers don't understand. Like, when you tell them, oh, this is going to be a 6 month or a 9 month project and it's going to cost you 300 grand because of XYZ, and you put an SOW in front of them, no matter how detailed it is, no matter how detailed the solution architecture is, no matter how detailed the BRD is, the solution spec, it's really difficult for a customer to understand and justify in their own head. And especially for a CFO, it's really difficult for them to go, why can't we just speak this app into existence? And why can't we do it in a week? Why can't we just, like, why does it take so long?
Yeah.
And why is it so hard? And why do we have to go through these 15 steps before we even start building anything? But I tell you, once you start playing around with these tools, you have a new appreciation for developers. And you especially have a new appreciation for elite developers that aren't using necessarily these chat UIs to write the first iteration of the code. You go, wow, okay, now I understand. Okay, cool. If I'm trying to build the most basic app in existence and it took me a week of vibe coding to get it 60 or 70% of the way there, and I'm going to need probably a developer to polish this and get it into a full blown production scale ready state. Wow. Okay. Now I start to understand. Now I start to respect. Now I start to appreciate. Now I start to have empathy for the developers. And now, maybe when you come back to a client, and if they've had any experience with these vibe coding platforms before at all, when you say, okay, this is going to take 9 months and it's going to be 300 grand, they don't go, what? Are you insane? Help me understand why that's the case. They're going to go, okay, that makes sense. I get it now. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's another upside that people aren't necessarily thinking about yet, that it's going to develop empathy for anybody that tries to build an app.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't worked in Lovable yet, but
Yes.
given your raves, I'm definitely going to try it out. But I have experimented on Gadget
Yes.
and built a couple of apps. What I found is that it's very good at getting the 60% there.
Yep.
And then you really have to start thinking about how you want to evolve it to the 60 to the 80 and the 80 to the 100%. And I found, maybe it's early generations of it, that you hit errors and you use it to work through those errors, and it introduces a totally different menu bar because you said, hey,
Yes.
change one entity on the menu, or like one link on the menu, and it goes from a horizontal to a vertical. And um, those are interesting, I think, interactions, because it does show you there's a lot of thought that has to go into doing a well built app, and a lot of work that has to go into it as well. So I think, yeah, that'll maybe bring some empathy to the engineering team.
No question about it. But I tell you, I think the upside of all of this is that as good as Lovable or Bubble or Gadget or Data Button, or there's it seems like there's a new one announced every day. These vibe coding platforms to do very specific things, and even I've noticed that they are getting better. Even in the short span of
Mm.
time I've been using Lovable, each iteration of it, every time I log in, it gets a little bit better at being able to interpret what I'm asking and actually make it a reality. They're never going to be worse than they are today. And that is the most exciting thing. Give this because I think Lovable just landed another $150 million investment round, if I'm remembering rightly, something or in that neighborhood, at a multi-billion-dollar valuation, and they didn't exist a year ago. They didn't exist, and it's just so interesting how even the AI industry itself is finding new ways to apply the underlying LLMs in a business context or in an app context or a software context. And I think that is the exciting thing, is that even the developers themselves they haven't really pushed all the boundaries yet of how we can apply this stuff in meaningful daily life. And I find that when I compare, for example, even just in chat interactions with ChatGPT, I'll have a Grok tab open, I'll have a ChatGPT 5 tab open because that's the newest one, and then I'll have a Gemini tab open, and I'll ask the exact same question in both, or I'll upload the same document and ask it to give me a summary or whatever to all three. And even though the underlying LLMs use similar sort of vector storage, they like the underlying data structures are very similar, but the experience they give to me as a consumer are still very different. And they're different in really unique ways. And so in some circumstances with some questions, one is better than the other. They might give me different ideas, different
Mhm.
suggestions, different hints. So I think we're going to get the same thing happening with these no code, low code apps as well. We're going to get some that are just really that, and it might even come just down to the individuals who's using them. They might be able to do equivalent things, but
Yeah.
you might prefer Bubble or you might prefer Gadget, and I might prefer Lovable just because of the way they've engineered the experience of the way that I consume that technology and the way that I interact with it. I might just simply like the way the UI is on one platform over another. Not that they can't both get to the same place ultimately for a similar price, but what's interesting also is that the underlying token cost is falling through the floor. And that what's cool about that is that these platforms all historically have had pretty tightly ring fenced capability, and they wouldn't let you go into areas that would consume truckloads of tokens with ChatGPT or truckloads of tokens with a specific database vendor with RPC calls or something like that. But now the cost of the underlying compute is falling so fast that now there's a lot less things that are off limits that we can do that are token intensive. And that means that really we're opening up a whole new suite of functionality that only hardcore developers had access to before.
Yeah, the whole reduction in cost of compute is really interesting. And I do wonder what's the impact going to be on the business models of a chat GPT or a Perplexity or a Claude or whoever it might be, when they have to constantly reduce the cost of their solution. It's looking at them as utilities, where if
Yes.
you've got an API and you can plug into Claude today or ChatGPT tomorrow, and you get in fundamentally similar result sets back, but the cost is different, we'll switch to the lower cost option. And I'll I'll be really interested to see what happens there. Do they become essentially like utilities, but utilities with low switching costs? So today I use Florida Power and Light as my utility. I There is no switching option. I'm
Yeah.
stuck with them, right?
Same with me here.
I'm
CFE.
going to pay what I pay.
Yeah.
But and that's a standard utility. As we look at ChatGPT, Claude, and the rest going head to head, there are low switching costs. So what's it going to do for their business model when essentially they're a commodity product?
I think what creates the barrier to switching is that particular platform's knowledge of you. Meaning that at the moment, like I do 98% of my queries are done through ChatGPT because I got a plug in Brave that reroutes all my queries directly to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT knows so much about me now after 9 months of 50 queries a day into ChatGPT. It knows me really well. It knows it knows how I like my answers structured. It knows the type of answers that I need to get my job done. It knows me so well. It's almost like the old Google versus the world type of experience where it just got so good, and this is going to be personalized. And Google, obviously, starting about 10 years ago, started to really heavily personalize the results per individual. So there wasn't just one set of SERPs, there was a set of SERPs for you. And
Yeah.
so I think that that is what is going to be part of the switching barrier. And I can see a future where something like a Lovable, after it's built 2 or 3 apps alongside me, it's gonna know exactly. It's almost to a degree gonna be able to read my freaking mind, and it's gonna go, okay, this is the scaffolding that I'm gonna build for every new app. It's gonna need these tabs. It's going to need this capability. It's going to need this reporting. It's going to need these cron jobs. It's going to need these things. I know it's going to need these things. Every single app he does, he builds this crap. He asked me to build this crap. So why don't I just build it out of the box as part of the original scaffolding for every single app we do going forward? And I feel like ChatGPT to a degree can read my mind, which is a little bit scary because no one should be able to read this mind. It'll drive you mad. But I see a world where the switching is more painful because of what the platform already knows about you and the efficiency that brings to the table versus the bottom line cost of using the platform.
Well, it sounds like it could be a reason that people stay on one platform and not switch to another because you've built up the knowledge base within that platform, and the switching cost is not the
Time.
cost itself, but it's the lack of knowledge that goes into the answers. So it's lower quality answers.
Yes.
The risk of lower quality answers is why you wouldn't want to switch. Jason, going back to the whole app for a second, something that struck me is that it's really easy for us to spin up apps on these platforms, but there still has to be, for anything in the enterprise world, a software delivery lifecycle, right? So you still have to have quality assurance. You still have to have security assessments. You still have to have uptime and hosting. So I think that we're going to get a lot more apps popping up, but I think a lot of CIOs and engineering organizations are going to have parts to bring those apps into the infrastructure and vet them and make sure that they get tested and make sure that the next time you make a change to it, the generation on the generative AI doesn't generate new functionality that you don't want
Yes.
or take away functionality that you do want. So I think there's going to have to be some structure and governance put on top of a lot of these third party apps. And it opens itself up actually to a level of AI driven quality control and change management control, where you essentially have AI tools that are making sure core functionality is still retained or making sure that you haven't introduced bugs as part of the process. So we're really early, but I think there's going to be this whole ecosystem of tools that start up around the business driven vibe coding capabilities.
And I think data security, data isolation, segregation, I think that's going to become a question. Like I can't even I don't even know. I looked at the Lovable docs. I can't seem to work out how much of what I'm doing is going back into train their models internally for their chat agent, for their development co-agent, their co-pilot. Like how much is going back in to train that? How much is going back into help training ChatGPT? If a bunch of users created their user accounts in my apps, what data would be shared with Lovable? What data would be shared with ChatGPT? What would they do with that data? Is the customer going to have to opt in for sharing their data, their usage data with Lovable, with ChatGPT? I think there's a lot of open ended questions around privacy, security, training data. I think that I think you're right. I think to get to that 60 or 70 or 80%, to get to a pre-production, to get to a rapid prototype stage, I think that is going to be massively assisted by these platforms. But then to make it into a real world application that you can put a T's and C's on a page on your website and say, when you use our app, this is the data we collect, this is why how we use it, this is what you're opting in for, this is what we don't do with your data, we discard XYZ. In order to put something hard and fast that could be provably, that you could prove in a court of law that hey, we're abiding by the T's and C's we have on our website or on our app homepage or whatever it is, or our app when you install it. I think that is the broader, harder question that still hasn't really been answered.
Yeah, we're in early stages of it. I think the maturity level of how to deploy these apps is still pretty low. We'll have a lot more experience this time when we check in again next year.
Give it another 3 months, 6 months, and it's going to be in a new wild place. But
Yeah.
it's certainly fun. I'm invigorated. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing in these early stages. I certainly don't feel that I'm going to be out of a job anytime soon. If nothing else, I'll start just developing apps and seeing what sticks. I'll throw a bunch of apps against the wall and I'll see what sticks in the market. But I don't think heavy duty, hard hitting consultants are going away anytime soon, especially those with deep experience, especially those that have been in the industry, especially those that have done the doing before. I think they're going to be in high demand. I think agencies are going to continue to be in high demand, but their role's going to change, and it's going to change. It's going to change pretty radically, and it's going to change pretty rapidly, if for no other reason than customers are going to expect the cost and timelines to come down from their agencies for everything that they deliver. Because they're like, if I can build a basic app in a week, then I would expect my agency, who in theory has developers that are 10 times or 100 times as good as me, then I would expect them to also be using this tooling or some kind of equivalent tooling inside to make them faster, to make them more efficient, to bring their costs down, to bring the time to value has got to come down. And so I think just the expectations of us as service providers, there's going to be greater expectations put on us to deliver and to deliver really quickly. And I'm already seeing the benefits of this in terms of my turnaround times for certain pieces of work,
Mm.
where historically I would have had to spend a week Googling to find an esoteric piece of data for a research report I was doing for a customer or something like that. Now, in an hour or two of having a conversation with ChatGPT, I can identify the sources for all this data. I can pull it down. I can download the PDFs. I can find the exact page, and I can reference it in my report. And it's like having a junior research assistant on staff at all times that doesn't get tired. And that to me is a real big benefit.
Agree. I think we're fundamentally going to be seeing quite a lot of change in our go-to-market models. There are some components that are going to get compressed, such as, say, engineering time. There are other parts that are uh, maybe going to change a bit as well, like requirements gathering. I think you can start off with much better requirements based on analyzing the existing site and based on pre-input surveys that can drive a lot of requirements. But something that I keep telling our team is that by default, AI is average, right? It's taking large volumes of data and coming up with the statistically most likely answer, which is essentially the average. And for us to really continue to provide exceptional service, we can take AI as a starting point, but then we have to layer on top of it experience and knowledge and go above average, give
Yeah.
above average results. And that's a real focus of ours.
I couldn't agree more. I think if we think of AI, at least as it is right now, as genius level autocomplete, if we think of it like that, or near genius level autocomplete, it's a really intelligent autocomplete system. When I'm looking at the underlying vector analysis that happens through cosine vectorized calculations, when I'm looking at that in my own app and how that when the similarity vector is calculated based on a cosine tangent away from a specific word, then I really start to understand, okay, this is largely just math that they're doing. It's really massively scaled math problems that they're solving for. They're turning every single thing that we're doing into a math problem. And not everything that we deliver to our customers can be turned into a math problem. And that's where the value lies. That's my sense.
That's a great way of putting it.
So, look, man, this has been yet again another fascinating conversation. I
Yeah.
think this will be super interesting. If we're struggling, if two people who've been in this industry for over 20 years each, living this, breathing this, eating and sleeping it every single day for over 20 years, and who are like, I consider myself a pretty highly technical person, non-coder but a highly technical person, if we're struggling to figure out where this maps to in our businesses and in society and in culture and in the future of technology, then how much more so are our clients likely struggling with those same questions?
Yeah, it's an exciting struggle though. I think it's the struggle is because of this there's so much change happening so quickly. But
Yes,
I think it's exciting and make some hypotheses and pick where we're going to go is the path that we're following.
I agree, and I think for me, I'm trying to keep the mentality of curiosity. I'm trying to let that lead. Just I'm following my nose in terms of curiosity at the moment. I'm just going, "Oh, that looks interesting. Oh, I read an article about Lovable. Cool. Let me go and try out this cool platform that I just read an article about in TechCrunch or whatever." I let my nose guide me to where something if it naturally piques my interest without me having to work too hard at it, then it's probably something I need to look at further and deeper. And I think if we can keep that childlike curiosity mindset, then we don't have to be scared of whatever it is that comes next.
I'd agree.
Love it. Listen, you're a legend. We'll get back on track. Episode 3, we'll pick up on
Yeah.
our next recording and we'll get back on track. But I think this was a really nice segue away from that sort of standard. When we set out and we put the outline together of what we wanted to cover, we knew AI was going to have to come into this conversation at some point. So this feels like a really natural segue to bring it into the series of episodes. Graham, thank you for your time. Can't wait to speak to you again soon.
Thanks, man. Nice chatting.